others within the Conservative Party. Tory peer Timothy Kirkhope, Lord Kirkhope, is a former whip under Margaret Thatcher and John Major. He was a minister in the dying days of the Major government in the 90s. And I asked him what he made of this apparent plot.
It's almost like winding back to a Labour Party which failed abysmally and has failed abysmally to get elected for a long time, mostly because of internal problems. And my view is that this sort of behaviour, if it's allowed to continue, it destroys our prospects, whatever they may now be, of winning the next election. And I'm very keen that we do win the election, despite everything. But it seems to me that people who are behaving in this manner, making threats, and doing it on the back of a personality who has been, and in my opinion, rightly gone, is something which is pretty shocking. Instead of offering the loyalty which they should offer now to the new leader of the party, the Prime Minister.
There's lots of talk about how the organisation we're talking about, David Campbell-Bannerman, the Conservative Democracy Organisation, they want to put democracy back into the Conservative Party.
Yes, I always sort of reach for a gun when I hear the word democracy in any title. I mean, I'm someone who knows quite a lot about Germany, and particularly the German Democratic Republic, which existed, of course, as you know, with one of the strongest police states that we ever saw in Europe until of unification in Germany in 1990, a communist operation. And always, whenever you hear this word democratic added in, you immediately think to yourself that is exactly the converse of what actually is in the minds of the people who have set it up. And that is the case here. It's a bit like also the word research. I love this. I mean, the European Research Group and this other research and Brexit research and all that research, they can do all the research they like, but actually what it covers is activity which is hostile quite often to the current circumstances in the party. And I don't think it can be tolerated. I was a whip in Thatcher and Major's time. I was a whip right through Maastricht in the 90s. We had no majority, the party, at all in the country. We were literally begging every night to get our votes through for anything, really. Here we have a party which, despite some setbacks, still has a majority of 69. A prime minister who has a majority of 69 has quite a little bit of latitude, in my opinion. And I think, really, he needs now to exert his position and make it very, very clear that it isn't the people who are supporting him that should be considered for deselection. It is people that are no longer offering loyalty to him and trying to undermine or destabilize his regime, as it were, in the way that they are. They're the people that, in my view, should be looked at very closely when it comes to reselection for the next election.
You talk about the Labour Party, get themselves in a mess a long time, ideological purity and so on. Actually, what we've seen more recently is the current leader of the Labour Party kicking out a former leader of the Labour Party. Would it be better for Rishi Sunak all round if he just told Boris Johnson to shut up and pack up and get out and go and write his book?
Well, I used the term in one of my tweets, I think, something I was using. I'm really reluctant to do this, but I used a quote of Gavin Williamson's when he said, "Shut up and go away," I think, to put it in the right vernacular. I think that's exactly the message that Johnson needs, and not only Johnson. There are quite a lot of other people who are playing this game now of trying to sort of talk up Johnson coming back or pushing the things that Johnson believed in still. I think this is just appalling.
Just finally, you were, as you mentioned, you were a whip for Margaret Thatcher and John Major. You were then a government minister in the last days of the Major government. How does what's happening right now within the Conservative Party feel compared to those times, and what might then play out at a general election?
Well, I mean, obviously, in many ways, actually, the percentages that we're looking at and the chances of our winning the next general election look almost worse than they did for a time under John Major, frankly, once he got through 92. I think it's really quite a problem. My own feeling, however, and I have been saying this, I have just underneath a tiny little tinge of optimism. I am an optimistic person by nature, but I mean, my optimism lies in what we need now is discipline in the party. We need a technocratic approach. We want a government that is good, but a little boring. I think people have had enough of all this fun and games, parties and all the rest. The behavior of individuals. They're sick of individuals and selfishness. What we really want now is to show the government is competent, that the Labour Party may well have plans that are actually pretty nasty when you start analysing what might happen, and therefore a whole swathe of the country will think to themselves, OK, I think we're going to stick with the Conservatives now rather than take a risk. And that's where I think we ought to be moving. And it can only be done if the Prime Minister asserts his authority, and I think he has authority now. And he would certainly get support of myself and an awful lot of other people, I think, to do that.
That was a Conservative peer, Lord Kirkhope, speaking to me about and trying to deselect each other.